Hey, everybody, welcome back to our third episode of 2025 of the Elephant in the Room podcast. We're so excited to have an amazing guest with us today, David Hooper, who is the founder of AL, which you guys are going to hear much more about today. We're going to talk all things AL. David and I actually know each other from a collaborative that we're in with Joel called Future Folklore. And people always ask me to describe it. And I kind of feel like I can't personally describe it because it's kind of like a support group for startups in the UAP field. I met David in California last December 20th of 2023. And I am really just honored to say that I got to actually see a live prototype of what we're going to be talking about today. And I have some pictures, so I'll drop those in at some point. But I want David to introduce himself to the community. Many of you already know him. I mean, he is out there. He's been at Seoul on several occasions. I got to see you again at Seoul this year. David, please introduce yourself. Tell us about your background, and then we'll go from there.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Krys and Ariel, for having me. I'm really excited to do this podcast. This is my first podcast in the UAP space, so very honored. My name is David Hooper. I'm the founder of L. L is a UAP detection startup. I've been working on L for the last 3 years, and I actually have been in the UAP space for the last 5 years. And a little bit more about myself. I have a undergraduate degree from UC Berkeley in electrical engineering and computer science. So I mainly worked on Vs, drones, embedded systems, FPGAs, firmware engineering, and that's actually what I did right after I graduated from UC Berkeley. I worked at a firm called Velodyne LiDAR. I helped develop LiDAR systems for autonomous cars. And so I was doing, coding and software engineering and some embedded systems design for these new LiDAR systems that we were developing for the autonomous car market. And so I did that for almost a year, just short of that. And I then got into real estate, out of all things. And I did that for a long time. And I'm still doing that actively as an investor.
Oh, wow.
I remodel properties. I add more units. I'm big into the ADUs, junior ADUs, SB9.
Okay. Are you in San Diego yet?
Not yet. I'm still
okay.
up
If
here.
you do, let me know because I could use your help getting back over there.
Yeah, I would love to.
I'm back for a tiny home.
Great. It's a great way to build up more units. In California, we have a housing shortage, so it's a great way to add more units. So I've been doing that for the last couple of years. I'm licensed in California as a salesperson and as a loan originator. I don't really do too much of that. I just have the licenses, just to see if it can help me in any way. But so I'm actively in real estate. Aside from that, my real passion, the thing that I love doing most is reverse engineering. Ever since I was a kid, I was taking apart electronics. My mom would always see me, just taking things apart. And I think that's where my curious, inquisitive nature comes from my childhood, just always wanting to know how things work. And back in 2020, when COVID was happening, I read a book by Diana Pasulka called American Cosmic, and that's what led me into the UAP space. But yeah, I'm an engineer. I'm also an investor, basically an entrepreneur. I like doing different things, and what I really want to do in the UAP space is empower our fellow brothers and sisters, humans, to make sense of what's going on with the UAP issue and the NHI issue as well. And we can do that through technology by acquiring data through these sensors and giving that to the community to see what they can do with it and make up their own minds, right? That's really my mission.
That is so ambitious. And I guess my first question to you would be, you read American Cosmic and you kind of get drawn into, this topic and you sort of go down the rabbit hole, where, can you kind of take us on that journey of kind of jumping into the topic and then kind of landing where you are now, where you want to contribute in this way?
That's a great question, Ariel. Thank you so much for that. So all my life, I'll give you this. I'll preface it with this. I was raised Catholic. My mom is, devout Catholic. She goes to church every week on Sunday or Saturday. And I had that as my upbringing. So I really had the faith to help me make sense of the world and of the supernatural, of, the religious nature of our universe. And so growing up, I believed in God. And that was a large component of, for me, understanding the world, right? It was through the lens of my upbringing of this faith. And I've always had that in the back of my mind as something to stand on. And I think I'm very grateful for that, because it's been a very winding road trying to figure out what's going on with reality. Even before I read American Cosmic and I went into the UAP topic, I was just trying to figure out, what's God, who's God. I read the Old Testament, I read the New Testament, I hear about Jesus Christ, about God, right? And I just always had questions. And to actually even give you more detail, I went to public school from like K to 8, and I went to a all boys private Catholic high school for 9 through 12, right? And with that, I got every semester uh, teachings of Scripture from the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it really helped enforce kind of the stories and kind of how these stories came to be from the different authors and from the different councils, right, that the Roman Catholic Church has used to create what we now know as today as the Bible. And for me, I was really grateful to have teachers and professors there in high school to help us come to terms with narratives, right? Um, Questioning narratives and to see who they empower and who they disempower. And that was really powerful for me, learning about these narratives and to see who uses them for what means. And that put me on a quest to figure out, like, hey, what's the intended use of the Bible, other than as a sacred religious document for people, but from authority structures and systems of control. That's what I was really interested in. And so um, I had all these questions, and out of the gate, out of high school, and then I go to Berkeley, and Berkeley, it's the mecca of questioning narratives, of figuring out reality, right? You have the brightest minds, the best of the best there. And for me, I was really challenged further to question my reality. And that's where I got to a point where I felt like my connection to God was somewhat murky, right? Questioning who God is, what God is, who am I? I really felt disconnected. And so I started to, ask questions. I would ask, my previous priest from my Catholic high school. I would ask him questions or ask other people, ask my mom. But I was just kind of confused. I wasn't sure what was going on with reality, because I had all these big questions. Where do we come from? Who made us? In the Bible it tells us one thing, but I really wanted to know. And so that theme carried on into the book American Cosmic. I one day during COVID, we're not doing anything, the world's just paused. I read this book, and it's talking about you know an account of someone who's a professor of religious studies, and she meets a NASA mission controller, meets and she has her friend who's a doctor from Stanford, and they go out to this crash retrieval site, right? And so for me, I was like, wow, this is really incredible, especially with the aspect of the religious point of view. And she details her time with that, and how she's seen others being affected by the religious aspect, where she talks about Tyler D having a religious conversion experience, right, when they go to the Vatican. So it really pulled two things for me, right? My quest to know what's going on with reality, and my background, my faith. And I felt really comfortable with that book as an entryway into the UAP topic. So for me, it's like a signal, like a light bulb went in my head, like, hey, this is your path, or maybe there's the answers here somewhere. So I kept pursuing it, and as I kept pursuing it, oh my God, the rabbit hole just went deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's like there's no end, right? And so there's all these considerations, all these ontological shocks I'm being faced with, and it's just back to back to back. And so I think from 2020, when I read her book, up until 2022, I was just trying to, you know, take in the material. It takes a long time to get to come to grips with the reality of, there's non-human intelligence here on Earth and have been here on Earth for a long time, and that has implications for where do we come from, the interventions on with humans. So it just opened up a can of worms for me. And as I started to get into it further, I started to make correlations and connections with different aspects of the questions that I had. And so, yeah, that's how I got to the point where I'm now, having these prototypes to basically answer those questions. Right. My mission is to answer what is reality, and my best way to accomplish that mission is through developing technology, sensors that can help us answer those questions. Right. We can have all these questions, and we can have a lot of testimony, but to really bolster that testimony, we need data, objective data that's going to help empower people who have testimony. And that's what I aim to do right around 2022, late at the end of 2022, 2023. And that's where I met Krys, and she saw the first version of my prototype that was mounted on my car. And so, yeah, from there, several other prototypes, and now it's in a Pelican style case, where that's all based off of Arrow's Gremlin project. They basically refactored their qualifications or specifications for UAP detection, and I just went for that. But we can talk more about that in a little bit.
Duplicated that.
So when it comes to, you wanting to understand the nature of reality, this is the big question. I mean, scientists, theologians, philosophers, so many have come before us, have, tried to answer this question, given their thoughts, given their theories. And I know a lot of people end up landing on this sort of, maybe fundamental reality is just unknowable. So what do you say to someone when you say this is kind of my life's quest? What do you say to someone who kind of pushes back and says, is this even knowable to our finite human brains?
That's a really, really, really good question. As humans with our limited senses, we can only perceive and take in what we're sensing, right? And so there's things that we're not even aware of, right? There's a whole spectrum of light that we can't even see. And some people have true gifts where they can see things and experience things that some people can't experience. And I think for me, the boundary at which humans can perceive and sense things is always being pushed. And this goes back thousands of years, where we have mystics, seers, prophets, and I think there's a resurgence that's coming about in the next couple of years, and it's been for the last couple of years, about pushing that boundary. So when someone has a question, right, is reality knowable? Well, we're limited by our senses and what we can perceive, but that's being pushed, right? And I really like Jason Giordani's concept of the spectral revolution, where we have, as we progress through the technological singularity, a resurgence of these latent abilities that we may previously had at one point. And that's what's going to help further define the answer to that question as to coming to understand the cosmos. And this gets right into the topic of psi, right? And what we have as sensory input, it's limited. And I think that's the factor at which people are really frustrated, right? Like, they want to know more. They want to experience, God in a way. I think that's what I'm searching, right? I want to know who God is. And one thing that I think helps me, and this is something I learned recently, it's something the ancient Greeks knew. They used to have over their temples, at the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, one of the maxims said, know thyself. And I think for me, what that really means is, when you ask that question, can we know reality, or can we really know the extent to what everything is? What's the real meaning behind this reality? I think that's an introspective question, is if we know ourself. And that requires meditation, that requires coming to terms with what is your existence. So for me, it's an internal pursuit at the same time, right? That's a big foundational aspect of it. Along with the internal introspective aspect, there's also the external, right? Everything external to us. And to make sense of that, that's where I see technology being a huge component. And technology is so crucial for humans because that's how we come to a better understanding of our reality outside of ourselves. We can apply that to ourselves as well to be able to monitor our heart rate, our brain activity. But sensors are great to understand things that we can't perceive. So that's why I like to bolster my own introspective process with technology so that we can have a better understanding. So to answer that question, and for people who have this quest or trying to figure out if we can fundamentally know reality, I think there are certain limitations because of being human, right? We're in this space-time construct where we can't come out at a higher dimensional level and see past, present, and future. But there are techniques to be able to do that, right? Where you have out-of-body experiences, you have altered states of consciousness. And this is all very relevant to this domain of UAP and NHI. And these practices, these mysteries have been going on for a long time in different ways. And at the core of these practices, these mysteries, is technology. It's the techne of how to apply certain craft, and craft in the traditional sense, not like a UAP, but your calling or the thing that you do really well. How to apply this craft to be able to understand reality better. I think that's the important part, that when we start to understand what we knew long ago, but we have forgotten how to perceive reality in a different way, we may start to unravel those questions and find solutions to them. But it's a really big undertaking as well, because these mysteries and these experiences that people engage in are truly divine, right? It's you're connecting with something more than yourself. You're connecting to the field of consciousness that we are walking through at all times, but we're just not aware of. So I think we're going to get a better, clearer picture of a solution, but we're always going to be hitting new ceilings, and we're going to break through those ceilings as we start to come to understand ourselves and know ourselves again. Yeah.
So gosh, so many things I want to talk about. You went through a lot there, and I have so many questions.
I want to say one thing. I feel so comfortable with you guys. I'm so glad I can, be myself and truly talk about things, because, it's hard to talk about a lot of these subjects, and especially with how I've made different connections across different spaces. I'm not saying others haven't, but they're tough things to talk about, and I feel really grateful to be, talking about this with you guys.
Well, we're so grateful to have you here, and you are very eloquent, and the connections that you are making are so beautiful, and that I love to talk to someone who is attempting to balance the introspective with the technology, because sometimes I think when we focus on solely on one or the other, you're going to miss out on a big piece. And so I love that you're kind of trying to fuse them together and build a foundation that has both of them there. I love it.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me, Jesse Michaels, I was talking to him one time about Skinwalker Ranch, and he gave me a really good tidbit was, if you're going to go to Skinwalker Ranch, something that really needs to be aligned is your internal with your external, right? Like whatever it is that's internal to you, your feelings, your mind, that isn't very evident to the outside, that should be coherent with how you act. Because if not, when you go to Skinwalker, that's going to come out, right? Like that will manifest in different ways. It just reminds me of that, right? Of what we were discussing right now, that it's an important quest that both be aligned or not be so incoherent. They should match.
And I hear people, I'm curious, are you an experiencer? Do you claim to be? Do you want to talk about that? If you don't, that's fine. What about you? What has been your experience?
Yeah, that's another great question. I actually remember when I first met you, Krys, we were having dinner at Javier's, right? And was it Newport or somewhere? It was you, me, your husband, and Jared, and I think was that all of us?
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, and we actually, yeah, I remember that picture. We actually discussed this, and I remember what I said to you, and what I said to you was, in terms of the normal experiencer who has like a very specific event, I'm not an experiencer in that way. But for me, I would consider myself an experiencer, but it's a little bit different. I've always experienced it ever since I was a little kid. You know, it's for that's me personally.
Yeah.
I was just talking to someone the other day, telling him about some of these experiences that I've had as a kid. I remember being on the playground, and we were playing this game where it's basically a ball tied to a string to a pole, tetherball, I think. Right? Yeah. And I just remember at some point, I don't know what happened, but I had this feeling that I could see from a third person. And I remember this to that day. I was like, does everyone see this? Right? Am I the only one? Is there something wrong with me? And I've had different types of those experiences throughout. They come and go in my memory, but I try to be aware of my own bias when it comes to that, right? I don't want to give too much focus on that and take away what it is that I'm internalizing or what I'm experiencing throughout my life. And for me, that's that connectedness to God. I think I've always felt that, and it's manifested in different ways, whether it be I can see from a different point of view or I connect a certain way with other people, but I've always experienced it. And I think as it relates to UAP, I've had, through my work with the prototype detection system, I've had some experiences where we've seen some anomalous stuff. But for me, it's my entire life. I'm like a living embodiment of the experience. That's how I like to see myself. I'm not. It's not like a very specific event where I had like a change, but I've always felt something. I don't know what to call it, but you can call it my guardian angel, or something more than me, or my best self. But I think that's God. That's at least what my intuition tells me.
That's really beautiful. And to, I guess, because I think this happens to a lot of us, whether we're experiencers or not, questioning our sense of reality. What was it that you felt, if you can identify it, that like maybe a religion or the Catholic faith or whatever didn't answer for you, that you felt you needed to continue seeking? Sorry.
Yeah, I could. There's a lot.
You don't want to answer, like we can edit this out.
And that's a very, very broad, because there's probably a lot of different threads that you were pulling at, and it's hard to maybe distill it down to one specific thing.
Yeah, you're correct. There are a lot of different threads, but to narrow in on a really crucial or important thread, at least to me, it would be about this concept of narratives and power structures and control, right? Mm-hmm. I think what the Roman Catholic Church today, what it is today, is very different than it was, in the past, in history. But if you look at it, right, they were a power structure, an authority figure, and they were calling the shots and saying, hey, this is the way things should be. Yeah. And with that in mind, right, you really have to examine what is the purpose, or what is the goal of this authority structure throughout time. Well, it's tough, because I'm thinking, as well as I'm thinking about different accounts of creation myths, right? You have the account in Genesis where God creates humans, but then you look at the Sumerian account of human creation with Enki and Enlil, right? These two these two beings that created humanity. And as I started to poke at that, I'm wondering, well, if this is one narrative, and there's this other narrative that the Roman Catholic Church is pushing throughout time, throughout history, what's the point of that, right? Why would narrative if we're just supposing that both can be real, one of them can be real. I'm not saying like one is real, one isn't. I'm just open to interpretation, to re-examine my bias or my upbringing, so we can figure out what is the true nature of reality. And when I do that, I'm thinking, well, if our physical bodies, if we were basically engineered by another intelligent life that was not the source of the cosmos, not the source of consciousness, not the source of our, what does that mean for humanity? And with this understanding, how does it impact power structures and their ability to control humans? I think that's the crucial part, right? And this is something that really digs at me, is the topic of slavery. How we've been enslaved in different ways, whether it be now in today's society through monetary means, the classic 9 to 5, or in other ways where, we were, enslaved as humans, right? And for me, it's this concept of slavery comes up. Well, if you can control the narratives, you can control people, and you can enslave them, whether it be physically or mentally or consciously.
Yeah.
And that's what I think has been going on. These different ways of enslaving humans to keep them from knowing who they really are, how powerful they are, and where their true origins come from. And that's not to push away these stories from the traditions of the Catholic faith or a Christian faith, but it may be a little bit different. It's not to push that away or push that down, but as you start to unravel things,
well, it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? Like
yeah, exactly.
To me, it's like, we're afraid of the wizard and they're so powerful, or and then who's really behind the wizard? Who's and it doesn't mean that there's not a God. It's just like my husband and I always say, we always felt like Jesus's identity was stolen. It's been hijacked by different groups of people. And, whether you believe it or not, I went through the same thing as you, David. Like, I grew up Catholic, I was raised Catholic, but I always had these questions outside of, because there was I felt like a sense of secrecy about a lot of things. Like, why aren't we really studying the Bible? Why don't we only study portions? Like, I don't know why I had these thoughts when I was a young child. Like, who does that? So I went to my brother's church, which was more evangelical, and then I met my husband who's evangelical, so I went down that path. And it's not that they're all wrong. I think they've all been valuable and beautiful things to my life, but at the same time, I'm still like, wait, there's still a narrative that I don't agree with and I don't understand, even in this. Like, maybe the intent of it was this, but the way we've twisted it has gone downhill, and that's that incongruency in my heart where I'm looking for something.
I think humans can snuff that out. I think humans have this intuition where they know something's not right. That's not to put down anything, right? But they know fundamentally there's something awry or there's something missing. And it's that soul search for the truth that ultimately led me to where I am today. And I think you as well, Krys. And I connect with you and I empathize with you on that, because I think we both had a similar wanting to know more. And I agree with you. I like how you mentioned, how come we don't study the Bible more? If you look at a classicist, which is somebody who studies ancient Greek and Latin texts, their whole job is to look at the text and not to give a theological interpretation, but just give you the plain translation from ancient Greek or Latin to English. And for me, that has been my latest ontological shock. I've had almost 10 from the time I've started with Diana's book up until now. And each successive ontological shock that I've had has really reframed how I view the world and my place in the world. And I think that's what my soul has been wanting, was like to go through this process of destruction and creation, to be born again. And this is a really pivotal concept in the ancient mysteries, where you're reborn. And in the Catholic faith too, with baptism, these concepts are still around. And it's that process of purification that I think our soul needs to go through here on earth. I think that's at least what I'm figuring out, is like, we're purifying ourselves to know who we really are, and there's different ways we can get to that point. We can go through that purification process, but I share that sentiment with you, Krys, that we've had similar tracks in life.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think that it's hard for us because we are in like an industrial society, we're in a Western civilization. I do have this side in me that's very logical. So there's this like desire to have a logical religion that we can validate and da 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 da. But then I think we tend to ignore the experiential side of our faith and our experiences because we're afraid to cross, even in faith and religion. I mean, I just picked up the book of Matthew the other day, and like the first, 5 verses have like 3 angel visitations and dream precognition, and like, I was a youth pastor. How come I don't remember it that vividly? Now that I look at it from this lens, I'm like, wow, it's right in front of us, but we're just stripped of that ability to embrace both sides of our. David, let's flip to the technological side of it.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about like what you guys are doing or what you're doing, what you've designed. It was really cool because I think I heard about you at Soul the first year doing this, but I saw you this current year. And you were out there and you were displaying, and I have some pictures I'll show you guys. He was displaying his device to like everybody, and everybody who's everybody is at Soul, because I don't mean that, and like I mean like the people, not me. I mean the people who have the money to invest in things like this, in the science and the research and background. So what was that like? And tell us what your new venture's done.
Yeah. So I can give you an overview of the system if you would like, and then from there I can talk to you about actually using the system with experiencers or summoners or people who connect with NHI or UAP, as well as going to different conferences across the US. Okay. So I'll start with the system. So our system fundamentally is composed of optical cameras, right? So you want to have optical cameras that are pointed up in the sky or looking at the sky to be able to see or track UAPs. So that's the first line of defense that we have. We have a variety of them in different spectrum of light as well. So we have all sky cameras, which are basically panoramic cameras, hemispherical cameras that look up at the entirety of the sky. We have pan tilt zoom cameras that are basically able to maneuver on the pan and tilt axis and also zoom in up to like 32 times zoom. And then aside from that, I've also built my own custom pan tilt unit to be able to house and support other types of cameras that have a different response to different frequencies of light, namely in the UV ultraviolet and the long wave infrared. And the reason why we want to have other frequencies of light being able to be detected by the system is primarily because if you look at the work by physicists and scientists such as Hal Puthoff and Jack Sarfati, there's current theories that try to explain the propulsion or the physics behind UAP. And one of the theories is that if we look at the space-time metric engineering that could possibly be going on with UAPs, the effect of that is there's a Doppler shift with light when UAPs are maneuvering through the sky. So if light is passing in and around the UAP, it can either be red or blue shifted depending on the mode of travel, if it's coming towards you or away from you. To give an analogy or give an example, it's very similar to how an ambulance, when it's driving by, you can hear the audio change in frequency as it's traversing. So the same thing happens with light, or the theory is the same thing happens with light if there's local space-time manipulation, right? If these craft are truly manipulating the local space-time around it, then any light that passes around it should also bend, depending if it's coming towards you or away from you, either lower in frequency or higher in frequency. So those are the two ends that we're looking at. So we have the visible spectrum, right? And then we have the infrared, and then we also have the UV on the two ends. So you want cameras that are sensitive to those frequencies of light to be able to see this
outside of the
theoretical
human
effect.
spectrum.
Exactly. So that's what I've been adding on to the sensor systems in the optical array of cameras. Okay. And I've done some engineering to build custom pan tilt units. It was actually pretty cool. I'm not a mechanical engineer. I'm an electrical engineer, and I also have a computer science background. And so I can CAD, right? I can make models. I can 3D print. I used to do that a lot for a UAV organization that I had up at UC Berkeley.
At Berkeley, right?
Yeah. So that's no problem. But I'm not truly a mechanical engineer. So that's why I want to hire one pretty soon. And so I've been able to design, all the mechanical stuff. But there's still, I want more in terms of the design work, and it's just hard for me with my limited knowledge in the mechanical space.
Yeah.
It's not that I can't learn it, but it's better applied to other things.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so I've been able to, do mechanical design work for our slip ring integration into our pan tilt system, which is a pretty cool technological aspect of passing power and data through a revolving axis, right? So if you think about a camera that's able to move, right? If you want it to move independently of the wires, you're gonna have to be able to pass the data and the power without it getting twirled up with the wires.
Oh yeah.
That's what slip rings are for. And so for me, it was my first time learning about it. I didn't learn about it in my classes at UC Berkeley, but I learned about it just in building these systems. So it was really cool. I love learning new things, so it was really amazing to learn about it and try to figure it out and incorporate it into the sensor stack on the hardware aspect. So I did that as well. And then, so that's the optical camera array. We have several optical cameras. We have about 5 or 6. We also have a Psionics Aurora, which is sensitive to visible UV and infrared light as well onto the pan tilt head. So we have, I think, 5, 6 cameras on there. Aside from the optical cameras that are looking up in the sky, you also want environmental data collection, right? So you want environmental data of readings of radioactivity, which would primarily come from a Geiger counter. And so we're able to detect alpha, beta, gamma, and X-rays, right? Because it's often associated with UAPs that there's a radioactive component to it, right? So that's something that you really want to have on board the detection system. Aside from the radioactivity that we're able to pick up, we also have atomic clocks on board. So the theory is if there is space-time manipulation occurring, then there is also possibly time dilation occurring, right? There's these disturbances in time from relative to the UAP. So if you're nearby a UAP and you experience missing time, well, that's time dilation, right? Because of the space-time metric engineering that's possibly going on with the UAP. And that's often reported in the literature and in the testimony of experiencers and people who have had experiences with NHI and UAP. So that's something that you want. You want a very precise clock to be able to pick up those time discrepancies. And you need 2 clocks. You want an atomic clock that's near with you or near around the UAP or the encounter. And then you want a clock that's synced with that clock that acts as a control that's far away from the event or from the experiencer. And so these are the things that we want to consider when looking at the phenomena, whether it be from the craft or any of the beings that are reported associated with the craft. They may have some technology to be able to mess with time as well.
Right.
Who knows? Aside from that, we also have an array of software-defined radios. The cool thing about software-defined radios, they're called SDRs, the acronym, is that you can use them for a variety of means, right? One really cool thing that you can use them for is passive radar. There have been several papers published about the use of SDRs with passive radar. Mitch Randall has his project where he's advocating for the use of a nationwide passive radar system where each consumer, each individual will have a passive radar unit, around $250. And they would have that, and we'd be able to map out the skies with this passive radar solution. And I'm a big advocate for that too. And all hats off to Mitch and everybody else working on these different types of technologies to empower humans. That's what it's about, right? This technology that we're building or we're creating into a system or giving to consumers, we need to be mindful of how it can empower humans. I have like my mission board back that I did in college. And one of the things I wrote down on my mission board was basically, the people come first and the technologies follow. And I've always been a proponent of that, right? You got to think about how this affects the people that are using it, or how it can empower them. And so with a passive radar solution, it can empower humanity to be able to see what's in the skies. We wouldn't be reliant on an active radar tower, right, that the military usually uses. We can do that. And the cool thing about passive radar, the way it works essentially is you have this SDR, the software defined radio, and you would basically tune that radio to a specific frequency of an active transmitting source, right? So if you have an FM radio tower nearby, or you have a digital television tower, that's broadcasting a signal, right? And that can basically, or essentially, illuminate the skies. And if anything passes between you or the receiver and that transmitter, we should be able to see the reflections of that and map that out over time.
Wow.
So that's the concept with passive radar. And so you just need a software-defined radio to do that, and some really nice antennas. And we have that on board. Another aspect, or another application of software-defined radios, is you can do ADS-B monitoring of the skies. So, it's the FAA mandates that anything flying within our skies transmit a signal saying,
right,
who's operating, who's the owner, their altitude, so that we can be safe in the skies. And so you also want that on board so that you can exclude known craft, right? Any airplanes, helicopters, drones. So that's essential for any UAP detection system. The other application of a software-defined radio is to do frequency scans of the local radio environment, right? So if you think about Skinwalker Ranch, a commonly associated signal at Skinwalker is the 1.6 gigahertz signal, right? So if you have a software-defined radio that's able to look around that frequency, you're able to see if there's any peaks in the power output of that specific frequency. If there is, that might be a correlation with the other data from the optical cameras, from the radioactivity, and from the atomic clocks, right? You want a holistic picture of UAPs and NHI. And we can get more into the NHI aspect, because I have a lot of considerations for that and where I want to take the startup. But we really have to nail down the characteristics of UAP. And what's a really great way to look at it is through the 5 observables, right, that Lou Elizondo talks about. But build the sensor systems around how it empowers humans and how we can characterize those 5 observables. That's really how you want to build a UAP detector. And that's how I've done it. Aside from those sensors, I'm trying to think what else I have. We have an electromagnetic field strength meter, which just looks.
What about an EM detector or whatever?
Exactly, right. I think there is a device out there that's a consumer product called MUPAS that does the same thing, right? It's looking at the electromagnetic field strength of the environment to see if there's any, disturbances.
I used to play with them when I was filming, and I didn't know what I was doing. And
yeah, I did.
Red alert in my house, and I was like, maybe my house is radioactive.
Yeah, so
I know what I do, but I have data.
Yeah, and the data is an important piece, but you want sensors that are characterized or geared towards UAP, and that comes from understanding the testimony, the reports, right? Really getting in depth into the literature, and that's what I did for 2 years. Aside from that, and this is all right now, my latest prototype it's all housed in a Pelican case, right? And this, as I was mentioning earlier, Arrow's Gremlin project, which was announced by Tim Phillips, I think a year or two ago, is where they're essentially trying to do that. And they've come out with other publications after that, talking more about the system. And the difference between their system and our system is that they have active radar. That's one thing they can do. And you can actually incorporate that into a UAP detection system. There are these 2 brothers out in Long Island called the Tedesco brothers. And they have a Nightcrawler project, right? An RV outfitted with all these sensors. And they actually got an FCC license to be able to do that. And so you can do that. They have these 2 marine active radar units that are positioned in the X and Y axis so that they can get, a nice clear view of the skies. But, those are limited to, I think, up to 20 miles or so. But you would want all this incorporated into a setup. But it's just one of the biggest factors that I've tried to consider is, like, how do you deal with cost, with weight, with portability? There's all these factors that you need to factor in. And I've just tried to do something that's readily portable, can be set up very quickly, that's automated, that has backup comms, redundancy. Right? You don't want to be out in the field or out with an event and then everything goes to shit, or your power goes out, your networking
It always
goes.
does. Trust me.
Yeah, I know this is a crucial aspect of the phenomena, whether it be intentional or non-intentional. And this is a good segue into Soul. That's pretty much the whole picture or view of the system, other than the power management and the networking, which is all integrated into the Pelican case, along with a couple compute units that we have on board to do the processing of the video data as well as the other data. Yeah, we have that all on board. And then we have cellular comms as well as Starlink to be able to do live streams or backup data to the cloud. But to segue into Soul and talking about how the phenomena may have an effect on our ability to detect it, Kevin Newth was giving a talk about how UAP may play a role in affecting automobiles, especially older ones, right? And so he gave this great talk about it. And I went up and I asked him a question about, how do we design around the effects of UAP, whether intentionally or non-intentionally? And his response was just very straightforward. He's like, well, you should have two sensors, right? You should have two systems. And I totally get that. But for me, I gave an even deeper consideration for that, which was, how do we build into the system's redundancy, shielding from electromagnetic noise, whether it be coming directly from the UAP, targeted or non-targeted, just an effect of how the UAPs operate. We have to consider that. And those are the things that I want to really incorporate, because as I've used the system, my first time using the system, I had weird anomalous stuff going on where we were recording all fine. This was out in LA. I was with Robert Bingham. He's called the UFO Summoner by the LA Times. You can look him up.
I think I've heard
He's
of
a
him.
cool guy. Yeah. And we were out with him with a group out by Dodger Stadium at this public park. And we saw, he called out, hey, there's this black orb flying through the sky. And my system was up and running. Everything was good. It was back then, it was like version 1 of my prototype, which is the one you saw, Krys, that was mounted on my Tesla, on the custom roof rack that I designed. And as soon as I looked over to it, I got a good look at the, the black orb just floating through the sky. And then I saw on my feed on my laptop, I remote into the detection system, so I'm able to see all the data come through and all the video feeds. And I saw it for a few seconds, and then boom, my MacBook just went off. It was the weirdest thing, because I tried turning it back on, and it showed this little symbol on the screen of the MacBook showing like a data corruption issue, which is weird. I've never seen that in all my time working with MacBooks, being an electrical engineer, computer science. I was like, okay, this happens. You put a strong magnet near your hard drive, your SSD or whatever, right? And I'm super careful not to do that. That's never happened to me. And so out of nowhere, as I'm looking at this unidentified thing in the sky, this happens. I'm like, what the heck? And so my first concern was, well, I hope it's not affecting the actual system, right? I'm just viewing the data coming in live, but I just hope everything's good, that I still have the data on board on the detector. And so I'm trying to troubleshoot, like restart my laptop. And it wasn't until the UAP went out of sight that my laptop was able to turn back on. But that's not normal, right? Like from an engineering background, if you have data corruption, right, you're going to have to reformat the drive. You're going to have to reinstall the OS. You're going to have loss of data. But no, it was fine. It was like nothing happened, which was just weird. So there may have been an electromagnetic effect on the laptop.
That is weird.
Yeah. So that was my first time getting this anomalous experience, right? Or this weird, spooky experience happening while using the system and, hunting for UAPs. And then one other example that I'll give where I had a similar experience, was I went to go visit Chris Bledsoe a couple months ago, last year. And Chris is great. I love the guy. He's doing great work. And when I went to go with him on the second day that I was with him, I spent, the day with him at his property. I had my detector there set up, just, recording and monitoring and collecting data. It wasn't, I didn't pick up anything anomalous And I was be like, okay, you know, it was at the end of the night. I was going to head home. It wasn't until I started shutting off and packing up that I start seeing phenomena in the skies in the tree line. And so it's so funny how either intentionally or unintentionally the phenomena might react, you know, to the people there, or, you know, the intent there. And so I try to be more aware of that. I think that's a big crucial part of the intentionality of the beings or the subjects there. It really, the vibe does need to align, you know, for the phenomena to disclose itself or
I want
whatever.
to be seen.
Yeah, because
Like,
I've experienced that where if the vibe's not right, it won't disclose, or it may, you know, there may be some spooky stuff that happens. But yeah, to make it short with Soul and with the conferences that I've been to, it's been great. I love going to UAP conferences and just meeting other people and getting to know the community, getting to know all the different individuals that have different missions, different projects, and just collaborating and seeing how we can help each other. That's the biggest thing that I've witnessed, is that there's a big desire to help and to collaborate. And I've made a lot of connections. I went to the SCU conference in 2024. That was awesome in Huntsville, Alabama. Met a lot of great people there. I've been to the last 2 Soul conferences, which have been really cool. And one little tidbit that I want to give for that is that with my detector, right, I try not to step on any toes. Like, I don't want to like detract away from the conference. So I'm very careful and very conscious about being respectful and not, you know, just hey, like everybody look at me. So I try to be really low key with it. And I just hope any conferences that I've been to, you know, I just hope no one felt disrespected. That was not my intention at all. I just wanted to, you know, showcase what I've been working on and talk to people about it.
I mean, because I guess what's the next step? Like, what are you hoping for this to be a civilian device that somebody could purchase and start, like someone like me who has experiences, I want to start getting better data? Or is it going to be like, who knows, Skywatcher's going to buy this from you because they're out collecting data and blah, 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 blah. Like, what's the kind of goal?
Yeah, great question. So there's 2 phases that I see. Phase 1 is building this sensor system that is fully equipped to be able to monitor and gather data on UAP, right? From everything that I was talking about, from the radios, from the optical cameras, from the radioactivity, from the time dilation. You want to be able to see that entire picture. The only downside with that is that the cost increases, right? So these systems at the level of data that you're getting from all the different sensors, it's going to be quite costly.
Right.
But we can engineer a solution for consumers over time for something at a lower cost, right? So currently, how everyone's doing this, everyone in the UAP detection space, they're taking consumer off-the-shelf products and they're integrating them into a system. And that's what I've been doing too. I've been also doing some custom hardware development and software development. That's generally how everyone does it. We have yet to see a truly engineered device. I think there's 1 or 2 devices. I think the MUPA system may be a custom engineered device, but there has not been one complete sensor system stack that has been engineered with custom PCBs, custom camera units, custom housings. And that's what I want to do so that we can sell that at the higher price point to any, you know, government agencies or organizations or, you know, groups like Skywatcher. And then moving into phase 2, we can then, with all the revenue coming in from these sales, we can then sell to consumers 3 different, you know, just to start 3 different types of products at the $250 mark, right? You would want some type of device that you can carry with you, or it'd be an attachment to your phone or something that you can leave at your home. There's already solutions like this, but we want to do it where it's part of a family of devices that would be all integrated into one software solution, right? So you'd have like an attachment for an atomic clock to your phone that you would carry with you, and the entry point for that would be $250. If you're someone who experiences a lot of time dilation or a lot of missing time from your experiences, you would want to start off with that, right?
I see.
And then you can then get the second unit, which would be a passive radar solution that can hook up to your phone with a little antenna or something that you can have at home, which is something that Mitch is wanting to do as well. And that would be like the second component. So you'd have the time component, you would have the passive radar component, and then you would want the optical component. I think these three verticals are really the three key pieces for the consumer solution that you can start off with one at $250 and then move on. So all in cost to have a really cool, really good, great data collection system for consumers would cost you $750.
Wow.
And you can start off small with each device. The last one, which is I think where we really need to go, is the video data. And the thing with the video data and the video data that we need, if you hear a lot of the people who have seen the classified videos of the UAPs in the infrared with the forward-looking infrared cameras, those forward-looking infrared cameras have adjustable zoom, so they're able to zoom in on the UAP and get a up-close shot. The issue right now is the market for infrared cameras that have adjustable zoom lens. The price is coming down, but we can engineer and we can basically rapidly increase the time to market of these solutions for infrared adjustable zoom cameras that can attach to phones. But we'd have to engineer that, and that would require some capital. So hopefully that's the three tiers.
That was amazing.
Yeah,
I mean,
you want an infrared camera that can zoom in on the UAP, because those cameras are going to give you the best result of a good UAP data for video. That's all the best stuff that the government has for UAP videos all comes from the forward-looking infrared cameras. It's the top stuff.
Interesting. Wow. And then one other thing, which I'm obviously, but I think I heard this on maybe Jim Segala talking about it with the how put off research, but the ability to document or record the experience, an audio recording, I'm just saying would be really cool addition. I mean, you could do that on your phone or whatever, but just an easy way to remember to be like, oh, this is what I'm seeing. Or like one solution I'm looking for now, even though it's my past videos, is to be able to extract the audio like on AI or whatever and get transcriptions. So I can analyze, because I have my dad, multiple people talking and describing what they're seeing and experiencing. Some of us have cameras, some of us have binoculars, some of us don't. So if you can find some patterns in that, that either that audio or that experience or data, I think that would be amazing too to add on to it. So just putting it out there.
Yeah, there's always new tech that can be added into the sensor systems, and I think for me one of the most exciting possible additions is looking at the biofeedback from humans, right? Looking at the EEG and the effect of human consciousness on true random number generators to see if that through our intentionality, if we can have a determinable effect on random noise. I think there's an association there with the ability to telepathically connect to UAPs. So that's also something I've been working on as well.
Amazing. Well, David, we are at an hour and Ariel has to hop off, and I would love to talk to you longer and more about this, and I am sure that in the future we will be able to do so.
Yeah.
But wrap up with any final thoughts you have for us, because sorry, Ariel, I know you got to go. But one question I have that I think will be important for the audience, and maybe you could wrap up from there, is what do you say to people who are like, well, you're monetizing this topic? I think it's important to put in perspective what your thoughts are on that, and then you can wrap up.
Yeah, I think the key thing, there's nothing wrong with trying to sell a device that's going to ultimately empower humans and to give them more data to make sense of the reality. If there's anyone who's against that, I think they got to check themselves and figure out, what is it that they have against that? Because my pursuit is noble. I'm just trying to help humans, and that's going to cost money. Yeah. Like everything in life costs money. Yeah. So I feel nothing wrong about it. I think if you're honest, transparent, and not hiding things from people, you're going to be fine. So for me, I'm about transparency. There's nothing to hide. And I think that's the big issue with the community. I think they like we were talking earlier, they sense something's wrong or amiss or awry, and that's where these topics start to come
Feelings
up.
of
What's really going on, right? A grifter or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, you can really tell, just from your intuition, you can see what something's about.
No, and of course, I absolutely would never accuse you of that, and I just think it's a conversation that comes up quite frequently, and us in the community need to talk about it, because the reality is it takes money to do things, and the more that people invest in this topic, the further it's going to expand. So anyways, Ariel, thank you so much for joining me today in this episode with David. I'm so glad you got to finally meet him. I know I've bragged. I know I'm a little bit of a fangirl when it comes to some of this, but I'm excited that I feel like I was a part of history. And not only that, being on top of the roof in the middle of the city, looking out with this thing, I felt like I was in an episode of Ghostbusters, and I've never seen one. So thank you, David.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was like a complete technology lesson for me, because I know nothing. I am not a technology person, even just getting my computer to work. Krys knows, I've had so many issues with trying to get StreamYard and not even be able to find the audio button. And so that was just so fascinating. And I guess my one thought is you can detect gamma rays. Are you going to be able to detect the Hulk?
Well, possibly. If the Hulk is out there, we'll find him.
That was my one thought. I was like, ooh, gamma rays. Isn't that what happened with the Hulk? He got created with some gamma ray accident or something.
Don't ask me. You know I don't know sci-fi.
Anyway, I'm just joking around. It was such a great conversation. We hope that you come back on one of these days. We'd love to hear more. We'd love to hear updates, because this is an ever evolving situation where you're going to be making lots of tweaks, and things are going to be changing and moving forward. So please come back on in 6 months or a year and give us the update. And we'd love to know what some of the data is going to start showing with these devices. Is it going to be able to, like we said in our earlier part of the conversation, is this going to help contribute to our understanding of the universe and reality? That would be so exciting. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you both. Thank you for your hospitality, your warmth, and your kindness. It really means a lot to me to feel comfortable and to come out and talk to you guys. So I appreciate it a lot.
We're so humbled that we are your first podcast. I can't wait to one day tell the world we interviewed him first.
Yes.
Yeah. That's great.
All right. Thank you so much, David. It was great talking to you guys.